I'm going to give you 5 rock-solid faith builds that are going to range from levels 150 to 175. Everything is filmed on New Game Plus 6 and 7, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Starting off strong, we are going to have our Blasphemous Blade build. You can't have a top 5 faith build video without adding the Blasphemous Blade, with good reason. It's a phenomenal weapon, potentially the best weapon in the entire game, and that's even after Shadow of the Erdtree. The build that I've put together here is going to amplify every single aspect of Taker's Flames, allowing you to get as much damage out of that as possible. Now, there are a few different ways to play the Blasphemous Blade, but I decided to pump as much damage into Taker's Flames while still having some utility with the physical attacks. We're going to be buffing our damage as much as possible through our flask, talismans, and armor that we're wearing in order to make Elden Ring a complete breeze. You can do that pretty much by equipping the Blasphemous Blade alone, but I wanted to stack this build out to be the best build from 1.16 that we currently have. Now, this playthrough is currently on New Game Plus 6, but the damage is absolutely incredible. We are using a bunch of talismans from all over the Lands Between and the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, but this is not a New Game Plus build, so you should be able to get everything on this build within your first playthrough. So for this build, you have the Blasphemous Blade. For your armor, you're going to have the Black Dumpling, the Rakshasa armor set. For your talismans, you're going to have the Shard of Alexander, the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Age 1's Exaltation, and the Talisman of the Dread. For your flask, you're going to want to use the Flame Shrouding cracked here, as well as the Blood Sucking cracked here. And for your stats, you're going to have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 23 Endurance, 30 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 65 Faith, and 11 Arcane. As far as your buff goes, you can use any combination of Flame Grant Me Strength, Golden Vow, or Howl of Shabriri. Now, I do want to say, if you don't want to do any physical damage really with your sword, but you want to use Taker's Flames a ton, replace the Two-Handed Sword Talisman with either the Fire Scorpion Charm or the Ritual Sword Talisman to pump out some more damage. Now, when I tell you this next weapon and build is one of the best and most fun builds I have ever used, I am not kidding. The Ordovis Greatsword is an absolute stagger monster. This weapon does so much damage, and executing Ordovis' Vortex with the talismans we have as well as the armor set is going to allow us to obliterate every single boss in our path. There is almost nothing that can stand against the Ordovis' Vortex fully charged up. You are going to do an immense amount of stagger and stance damage, allowing you to get a ton of stance breaks to where you could morph this into a critical strike build, or you could just keep it as we have here and have a great time playing Elden Ring. This weapon does give you an A in strength, so this is going to be a strength faith build rather than a faith strength build, and this build is also a level 171 build on New Game Plus 6. I've absolutely enjoyed playing with this weapon. It's not super hard to get in the base game, and once you do, it can absolutely change the trajectory of your build and the way that you play. You are going to be doing physical and holy damage, so we're going to be spiking both of those as much as possible. And if you wanted to add incantations to this build as well, you could definitely do that. It would only accentuate the fun you're having as well as the damage you will be doing. So for our Crucible Knight build, we're going to be using the Ordovis Greatsword, also the Erdtree Seal plus 10. You're using all the Crucible Axe armor just because it's going to give you extra damage for your Ordovis Greatsword and Ordovis Vortex. I'm also using the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Shard of Alexander, the Godfrey Icon, as well as the Great Jar's Arsenal. Now for my flask, I'm using the Holy Shrouding cracked here and the Stone Barb cracked here. And when it comes to your buffs and stats, I'm using 60 Vigor, 17 Mind, 25 Endurance, 70 Strength, 21 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 41 Faith, and 7 Arcane. My buffs are going to be Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. This is level 171 build on New Game Plus 6. Also, while I've got you guys here, we do have a Patreon if you want to go check that out. It's a ton of free content for you guys, a ton of videos, and a ton of great value provided there. And we also have a Discord, which I will link down in the description below, so make sure you check those two things out. Now, our third build on the list is going to be a Coated Sword build. Now, this weapon does 0 physical damage, but you can stack the holy damage to be absolutely insane, and why not use 2 of them, making this a New Game Plus build. Now, even though holy damage falls off hard on the last few bosses of the game, it is still very viable in Shadow of the Erdtree, and you can still have a really decent time doing damage against most bosses. I love the coated sword. Its unblockable blade skill is one of the better ones in my opinion in the game. Being able to get through any defense in the game is super nice, and like I said, the holy damage of this weapon is pretty stacked, especially after we add all the buffs and talismans we're going to be using for this build. Now obviously this weapon is a straight sword, and when you have two straight swords you get a really fun moveset, which if you wanted to make a jump attack build with this, all you would have to do would be to replace the chest piece we're wearing with the raptor's black feathers, and you could get even more damage out of it that way. I love the jump attack for dual straight swords, and the coated sword is just a really fun weapon to use. You're going to have an A scaling in faith, and in this particular build our faith is going to be stacked out at 80, so we're going to be doing a lot of damage. Now for this build you're going to be using two coated swords. As I stated before, this is a new game plus build. You also want to have the maddening hand just for the extra damage on madness. Then you want to have the Rakshasa whole armor set for that extra damage there. For my talismans I'm using the two-headed turtle talisman, the Rottenwing sword insignia for my successive attacks, the sacred scorpion charm, as well as the shard of Alexander. Now for my flask I'm using the holy shrouding cracked here, as well as the blood sucking cracked here. And for my stats I have a level 170 build with 60 vigor, 25 mind, 25 endurance, 22 strength, 20 dexterity, 9 intelligence, 80 faith, and 8 arcane. I'm also using Howl of Shabriri, and considering you don't do any physical damage with these weapons, it wasn't necessary to do Golden Vow or Flame-Crafty Strength. Now for our fourth build, you're going to be an absolute menace. You're going to be using Blink Bolt on the Death Knight twin axes to pretty much become an electrified Beyblade and destroy everything in just a few hits. You can build up successive attacks incredibly easily with this build, and the damage of the axes is really good, not to mention lightning damage is phenomenal, and when you use the spinning attack of the Blink Bolt, you're going to be able to pour out a ton of really hard hitting and effective damage to every single boss in the game. I did a build similar to this at the beginning of the DLC, and I've just tweaked it a little bit, giving the Age 1's Exaltation a chance, and proccing that talisman after you get Madness from Howl of Shabriri skyrockets the damage you're going to do, but you do become a little bit of a glass cannon, as you will take 30% more damage. But if you can get around that and make sure you kill your bosses and enemies in a really quick fashion, then you are going to have an absolute blast and steamroll every single person you come across. Now the only caution I would tell you with this build is Blink Bolt can be a little bit hard to control, and you can completely miss your attacks, which can be devastating to you, so make sure you have that Ash of War under control and you should be just fine. Now for this build we're using the Death Knight twin axes at plus 10, you'll also have the Commander Standard for rallying standard buffs, then you're going to be using the Black Dumpling, the Rakshasa armor set. I was going to use the Rakshasa gloves, but it would have put me into a heavy roll with the Commander Standard equipped. For your talismans, we're using the Shard of Alexander, the Rottenwing sword insignia, the Age 1's Exaltation, and the Lightning Scorpion charm. For your flask, you have the Lightning Scorpion charm as well as the blood-sucking cracked here. And for your buffs, you're going to be using Rallying Standard and Howl of Shabriri. But for your stats, you'll have 60 vigor, 18 mind, 23 endurance, 30 strength, 15 dexterity, 7 intelligence, 65 faith, and 11 arcane. Now for our very last build of this top 5 video, we have an old weapon, but a new talisman that makes it just that much better. We are going to be using the Great Club, which is a strength faith weapon, to deal devastating damage and break stances pretty much as easily as we did with the Ordovis Greatsword. The addition of the two-handed sword talisman stacked on top of the axe talisman and the dagger talisman makes for an absolutely devastating combo, allowing for you to break stances easily, get great critical damage off, and also give us a little bit of survivability with how we've put this build together. This is one of my favorite weapons that I played with in the vanilla game, and it's just as effective, if not more so, now with the new talismans and buffs in Shadow of the Erdtree. And sometimes all you need in Elden Ring is something very simple, but something that works incredibly well. The Great Club, or my other favorite weapon, the Great Mace, are two fantastic examples of this that allow you to have a great time playing and do a lot of damage while having a very low skill cap to do so. This is probably one of the most beginner friendly builds you can make to take into Shadow of the Erdtree, And even though I don't have things equipped like the Rakshasa armor set or the blood-sucking crack tier with this build, you still do an immense amount of damage, so adding those items would only benefit you even more. But for this build, we're going to be using the Great Club as well as whatever armor set you would like. I'm using the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Axe Talisman, the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, as well as the Dagger Talisman. For my flask, I'm using the Spike Crack tier and the Stone Barb Crack tier, the perfect cocktail to break stances quickly. And for my buffs, I'm using Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. For my stats, I have 60 Vigor, 17 Mind, 25 Endurance, 70 Strength, 21 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 41 Faith, and 7 Arcane. This is a level 171 build on New Game Plus 6. And that's going to be it for this top 5 Faith build video, guys. I know Faith is something you guys have been asking me to do for a while. I am sorry it took me so long, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your favorite Faith build down in the comments below, and what game you're currently playing now. For me, I'm going back to Dark Souls 3, having an absolute blast, and I definitely might stream some of that at some point. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification on your way out. And until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.